Well, hi everyone, good evening. Thanks for joining us today. So this is a little quick foray into foraging. So I've kind of chosen plants that people could find in any patch of green they look at. So there are lots of lovely things out there that we could forage, but not everyone has access to, lush green spaces and lots of lovely plants, and they might like to look more local to where they live. So I've kind of picked a number of different plants that should be easy to find, that shouldn't be too difficult to identify, because I can't, for an hour together, I can't delve into identifying plants and how you choose one from another. So I've kind of picked plants which should be easy to recognize, and if you make a miss ID, it shouldn't be end of the world because it looks like something else that you can eat. So but kind of a few things really before I kind of leap into the kind of foraging presentation and kind of introducing you to the plants and what parts you can eat and how you can find them. So I mean, foraging itself is a journey of slow learning. It's when we do our foraging walks, we meet lots of people who are hoping to kind of learn all they can in 4 hours, but it kind of starts with a understanding of plants and how to identify plants, or starting with a knowledge of simple ID, and then you can delve into looking at what you can do with them to eat them. And but the great thing about foraging, which lots of us are already doing in this kind of unusual time, is spending more time in parks. So foraging gets you out in parks, it gets you enjoying them in a more intimate way, understanding the detail of parks and the way the seasons work, and getting to think about when plants might be available, because not all plants are available all year. But again, a lot of the ones I've picked today can be enjoyed pretty much all through the year. But when you are foraging, you do have to think about where you're foraging and whether you have permission. So in Tower Hamlets, in all council-owned parks like the Cemetery Park, it is illegal to take any part of a plant. So you should always check in with the landlord or the landowner before foraging, and checking it's okay to take what you want to take. But obviously looking and exploring is a great thing to do in its own right. So always good to check. There's a few little things that I like to keep in mind when I'm foraging. So, there's all kind of things when it comes to foraging. And one of the main things I always say to people in foraging is never munch on a hunch. It's pretty dangerous to do that with plants. You need to know what you're looking at, and you need, before you stick it in your mouth. So I have done a poisonous plants walk in the Cemetery Park, and there are 38 plants I show people that can give you symptoms from diarrhea to death. And some of the symptoms literally are death. And you don't get a lot of chance to kind of describe what's going on with you. So never munch on a hunch. And if in doubt, leave it out. Use it as an opportunity to have a learning experience, and take a bit of that plant home, get the books on it, and learn how to kind of identify and improve your botanical skills. But foraging in this part of the world is very much like sitting on a carousel. Some plants you only get a small window of eating, or like wild garlic's very popular, but its season's quite short, so you kind of need to prepare for it. So I often spend a lot of time talking about this and getting people thinking about foraging and when to do it and how to prepare. But the main thing is, bear in mind we live in a deciduous climate with 4 seasons, so you need to have an idea of what you want to forage, prepare for those foraging activities, regularly visit your parks, check in with these different plants, work out where they're growing, understand where they're growing, so that when you start to forage, you're always foraging from more than one place, never forage from the same place, and try and be considerate when you're foraging. You want to be able to kind of stand back and see and feel that you've not been there. So in the Cemetery Park, we ask people to not forage along footpaths because it looks a bit messy, and also that tends to be within leg cocking height, so dogweed. So try to avoid footpaths, edges. And we always get people kind of asking us about pollution and whether you should wash things. It's always good to wash things as a general rule, because you don't know what's been on the plant. And the other great thing is cooking will get rid of most surface pollutants. And then we often get asked about, well, what about kind of contaminated ground? It's a bit different with plants. Plants don't tend to absorb kind of pollutants in contaminated ground like mushrooms would. So when you're foraging for mushrooms, it's really good to know where you're foraging from and whether the ground had industry in it once. But with plants, you can be a bit more relaxed. The plants don't tend to absorb heavy metals and things into their cells. So wash and cook if in doubt. So that's a few things about that. There will be things dropping in the chat as we go. So some of these things are very simple recipes. Some of them are links to different things. So as I kind of talk about different plants, so do make notes of them and copy them as you go, and feel free to ask questions as we go. But I'm going to kind of start the presentation. So one of the things we deal with a lot in the cemetery park, and I'm sure a lot of open spaces do, is irresponsible foraging. So we need to be custodians of the countryside. Plants are not just there for human consumption. Plants are there for the benefit of other animals, insects and birds. So it goes back to what I said earlier. You need to kind of be able to step back and not feel that you've been there. So this is an example in the cemetery park where we've had people wholesale digging the plants. And this is the famous wild garlic. So this is the only time I will mention wild garlic, because foraging is much more than wild garlic. There are many wonderful plants to try. So there we go. That's not what you want to look like when you're foraging. You don't want to stand away back from a space like that. But let's go to our first plant. So here we go. Greater plantain, pretty much available all year. It has, in North America, in the States, the Native Americans there used to call it Englishman's foot, because wherever the European settlers went, this plant appeared. It is an absolute sturdy, rough and rugged, strong plant. It can cope with all kinds of erosion and being stepped on and trodden, and it just seems to thrive from that kind of interaction with the ground. So, and a lot of people would see this and not think it's an edible, but it is an edible, and it is a plantain, and it's got these lovely parallel veins. And a nice trick to do with this plant is you can actually peel the top away from the stem and expose those parallel veins. And it's quite a nice little trick to do. But in terms of what you can eat, so this kind of grows in a rosette. So if you think of a fountain, the young leaves come from the centre, and then the older leaves fall to the floor. So if you're picking this plant, you're going to want to pick from the centre, and those young tender leaves can just be eaten raw. But if you're eating the older leaves, it's always good to kind of treat it like spinach. It's great in stews, and it's just a nice thing to kind of practice. And you'll find this anywhere you look. Any bit of grassland, look down and you'll see these very distinctive leaves. And then later in the year, you'll get this very tall seed stalk, and those seeds can be eaten. But some people find them rather bitter, so they might add them to porridges or breads and things like that. But a lot of people tend to avoid bitterness and think bitterness means that the plant isn't bad. Bitterness is fine. I think in our current palates, in farming, we've kind of increased the sugar levels and sweetness of a lot of things we eat. So we don't experience a lot of bitterness in what we eat. So don't shy away from bitterness. It can be an exciting thing to kind of add to your diet and make your food interesting. So that's plantain. As I said, I'm not delving into too much ID and things like that, because there's a lot to show you and a lot to talk about. So I want to make sure you see lots of different plants. So our next plant, we can't really not do a forage until I mention the famous dandelion. We call it dandelion, which comes from, I believe, the French Dandelion. So if you look at the leaf there, the lion's tooth, the jaggedy edge of the lion's tooth. So the leaves of dandelion are edible, but when I eat them, I tend to take them from that centre stem, the midrib there in the leaf, and just use the triangular parts, because that centre bit can have that bitter, milky sap inside. But in France, they call dandelion pissenlit, which is wee in the bed, because it is a diuretic and it will make you wee a bit more than normal. So, but yeah, as well as the leaves to eat, you can eat the flowers. So not the flower in its entirety, but those petals. So kind of in April onwards, lots of people are collecting dandelion flower heads and getting those petals out and turning them into syrups. And so there's lots of dandelion syrup recipes online. It takes a couple of days to make. So if you were going to make a syrup and you wanted it to put on your French toast or your waffles, in the morning, you kind of have to think ahead a bit to kind of prepare your dandelion syrup. And you can also dig up the roots. Now, so a lot of roots that you might dig up, I tend to like digging them up in the autumn, winter time. Plants are using that stored energy in their roots to get ahead in the growing season. So the roots can often be quite woody or a bit depleted and quite small. So if you're collecting the roots of plants, dig them up in the autumn, winter time once the plant's kind of finished for the year. So you can cook and roast that and then grind it and turn it into a crude coffee. But also kind of boil it to extract the flavours, and that famous dandelion and burdock drink, when it's also made from the roots of burdock. So there we go. Dandelion's really easy. If you muddle it up with any of the catweeds or the hawk bits or anything like that, they're all edible, and you know, they're all quite good fun to try. But I do find with dandelion that the flavour and the bitterness changes through the year. So in the early spring, it can be quite palatable, and with a lot of wild plants, once they flower, they can get a bit more bitter. So general rule that I live by is kind of, you know, once you've recognised your plant, check it before you pick it, because it could be a bit bitter if it's flowered, and it might not be kind of to your tastes. So let's move on to the next plant. So here we go, sow thistle. Now, most people would walk past this plant and not even give it a second glance. And again, available all through the year. You'll find this plant growing everywhere, you know, in the cracks of pavements, near bollards, here outside the Soane Centre in the Cemetery Park. And, you know, people wouldn't even think that it's worth eating, but it is really good. One of the best things I did with this was in December, a couple of years ago, I tempura battered the leaves. So when you are picking a lot of plants, especially kind of tall erect plants like this, unless you're grass, generally most plants grow from the top down. So the freshest and most tender leaves will be at the top. The older leaves are nearer the ground, so always going to pick from the top. But lots of people do ask, well, why is it called sow thistle? So a long time ago, people believed that the milky sap helped the lactation in mothering sows, so female pigs, because it's got this milky sap inside. So, but the leaves taste like lettuce, so pretty good to try. You can munch them raw. The flowers are edible, the roots edible. But as I said, it's best consumed when the plant is young, so early on in spring, even though it's available all year. But as it gets older, I would recommend cooking things. So or if you are going to eat it raw, add it with more pleasant tasting greens, so it helps take away some of that bitterness. But with this plant, you treat it a bit like spinach. So you cook it pretty, not for very long, in, you know, boiling water. And that root, again, nice coffee substitute. Dig it up, roast it, grind it, use it like coffee in your cafetiere. So give it a go. It's a great plant, find it everywhere. Daisies. Now, daisies are good fun, aren't they? And a nice little fact I learned from Terry once is where the name daisy comes from, and it comes from the day's eye. Because if you've ever admired daisies before, on a cold, wet day, the flowers are often closed, but as soon as it kind of dries and warms, the flower opens, and it generally opens during the day and closes at night. So the day's eye. So, and absolutely every part of the daisy is edible. The flower buds, the petals, the leaves. You can even throw it all in hot water and make a tea, or dry it and make a tea. The leaves are quite celery-like, and the unopened flower buds have a slight licorice flavour to them. They're not as strong as regular licorice, but I think they have a nice licorice flavour to them. And the flower buds as well, before they open, can be pickled, and or just thrown into a sandwich. You know, just go for it. Just enjoy the plant. And pickling is a great way to have preserve things. You know, pickling, drying, chutneys, jams. You know, gone are the days of people having pantries. You know, my grandparents and my great-grandparents had pantries with all kind of preserved goods in them, and homes don't really have pantries anymore. And this was a method that people had developed because they didn't have fridges and freezers. So it was one way to allow things to last longer, because, you know, in our climate, nature is literally abundant, and she is throwing herself at you, and there is so much that you can enjoy and collect. So you need to collect while times are rich, and then do things with them to help you when times are lean. So pickling is a great thing to do. And the daisy, just get going on it. It's a fantastic little plant. And you can't have any foraging talk without a mention of stinging nettles. And you know, I'm very fond of stinging nettles, and lots of people have probably not realised you can eat them raw. And so you can cook them, obviously. I'll talk about that. But one of the nicest things and one of the flashiest things to do with your friends is show them, you know, that you're like Ray Mears and you're a bushcraft enthusiast. And like, look at me, I'm going to eat a nettle raw. So if you are going to eat nettles, always good to take the top 6 to 8 leaves. They'll be the freshest and nicest. In London, I generally find you can enjoy nettles all year. We at the Cemetery Park have made nettle soup in December. But coming back to eating them raw, so you're going to take one of those top leaves. You're going to make sure it's free of aphids and other invertebrates or insects that might be on there. And with a firm grip, you're going to make the smallest little parcel that you can with that stinging nettle leaf. You're just going to fold it, make a small square parcel, and pop that in your mouth. And I guarantee you will have something that tastes like runner beans. Quite sweet, really nice, and nice flashy thing to do. Any bruising or cooking of the plant deactivates those stinging hairs. So if you're nice and firm with the plant, you're going to suffer less stings. And I think it was Shakespeare who wrote to grasp the nettle as a way of dealing with a problem. So grip the nettle firmly, and you limit the chance of getting stung from it. But as well as eating it raw, you can use it in soups, you can use it in pesto, you can cook it like spinach, and you know, any. I know the actual Natural History Museum actually produced a book called the Stinging Nettle Cookbook, and there's muffins and cakes and breads and all kinds of different recipes in there for the inclusion of nettles, not just the leaves but also their seeds as well. So a great little thing, and another nice thing you can do with it is cook them like crisps. So a kind of relatively high oven, lay some leaves out in a baking tray, sprinkle some olive oil on it or some spray oil, bit of seasoning, your favourites, spice, you know, I like smoked paprika, so you can stick that on there and put it in a hot oven for a few minutes until they dry up, and off you go. Got some green crisps, and that cooking deactivates the stinging hairs. So lots of good things to do with stinging nettles. And if you miss ID with a stinging nettle and get one of the mimics, we'll see later, you're going to be absolutely fine, because the mimics are all edible as well. So there's a little thing about stinging nettles. And another one you'll find, and it looks very much like this time of year. This is Ribwort plantain, and you can see when it's available. And you know, and again, another plant people would kind of bypass. They wouldn't even give it a second glance. They wouldn't even think that it's edible. But the young leaves are edible, and again, they're going to come out the centre of the plant. Okay, and so you're going to use those. But those flower heads, look at those lovely kind of black, you know, greeny, dark brown flower heads with the kind of flowers sticking out of them. You know, you wouldn't think you could eat them, but if you pick them while they're green, so sometimes you have to just check one and kind of break it open, check it's green inside, eat that, nibble it, you will have something that tastes like a mushroom. It's quite bizarre. It's quite weird. You nibble it and it's like, wow, this tastes like a mushroom. So those young flower heads, while still green inside, are really nice, and they're good for pickling and adding those flower heads and those young leaves to soups and salads. An interesting thing, I always get asked about medicine when it comes to wild food, and it's a deep subject with lots of folklore and myth associated with it. But there are a few things that have kind of been tested by science that you can use. And Ribwort plantain is known to help with hay fever symptoms. And I've actually tried this with a volunteer. We had a group of corporates in, and this woman was absolutely streaming in her eyes and nose, really a lot of discomfort. And I just said, look, this is said to help with hay fever symptoms. Nibble a few leaves, see what you think. And yeah, she nibbled a few leaves, and within a few minutes her symptoms eased and she felt much more comfortable. So it's a night, it's worth giving it a try. But yeah, you'll find this everywhere, Ribwort plantain. Look out for it in your parks. It is a real nice plant to delve into and really good one to eat. Common mallow. Now most of you should have seen this around. It can get pretty tall, you know, a metre more in height. Early on in the year you have these kind of fan-like leaves, and lots of parts of this plant is edible. I mean, throughout history it was used for food and medicine, making poultices and ointments, and people believing it helped kind of ailments of the liver and kidneys. But in terms of kind of how to eat it today, those flowers are edible, but once the flowers finish, you get these small discs that are called cheeses, and while they're young and green, they're a great trackside treat. You can kind of pick them out and nibble them. They're quite edible. The leaves, the young leaves, you can cook like spinach, and they can be used to thicken soups, or you can deep fry them, which is really good. I love doing this with mallow. You can deep fry them and make nice green wafers. And another nice thing you can do with it is you can use it as a substitute for Egyptian spinach or jute mallow to make the Egyptian soup called maloikia, and that has kind of coriander and stuff in it. So I think there's a recipe that we put in the chat, and that's kind of found throughout the Mediterranean, Middle East and kind of North Africa. So this is a nice substitute for that. So you know, a commonly found plant, really worth giving it a go. I would recommend the crisps and the maloikia as a good thing, as a thing you can do now with it. Could do with it now. So look out for your common mallow. Let's just move on to the next slide. Hogweed. Here we go. So available from now until kind of later in the year. People often avoid it because of its name is similar to the plant called giant hogweed, both in the carrot family. Okay, but the giant hogweed do leave alone. That will cause blistering and discomfort if you get the sap on your skin. Hogweed, to a smaller degree, can do that, but you kind of have to have a genetic disposition to it. So most people can pick it and not suffer any kind of discomfort. I mean, they tend to itch rather than kind of feel like a blister. But those on the left picture, you'll see those young unopened leaves, and they're the things you want this time of year. So on the right, you've got the larger opened lobed leaves. But if you kind of move them to the side, you'll see these young unopened leaves in the center. And if you pick them, you can cook these like asparagus, or you can fritter them, temper or batter them. And honestly, they are a treat. They are really, really good. I mean, we've done it a few times in the Sown Centre for some of our wild food walks, and we just cook them like asparagus and a little bit of salt and pepper, and they go down an absolute storm. They really are worth eating and worth giving a go and looking out for, and quite a distinctive plant. But on the right, those lobed leaves can vary a lot in appearance. They can be quite wavy or quite round, those lobes. So, you know, do get confident with your ID. And in the carrot family, it does tend to cause a lot of concern because you do have things like hemlock in the carrot family, which are obviously quite poisonous and quite deadly. So yeah, carrot family plants are something you might build your confidence up to. But hogweed's quite distinctive. I can't think of too many things you could confuse it with. You know, maybe this time of year you could confuse it with a young giant hogweed because they do look similar, but giant hogweed has much thicker stems and more, and the hairs are more, they look like little thorns. They're really quite thick bristles. But later on in the year, you'll get the flowers, and they're quite tall, you know, half a metre or more. And those young open flower heads, they look like broccoli. And if you pick those off, you can cook them like broccoli and eat those young flower heads. And if you leave a few and let them push on through to later in the year and develop seeds, you can use those seeds as a replacement for cardamom. And lots of people put them in breads as well. You can nibble them. They're really, you know, really quite, they do taste a lot like cardamom, those seeds. And in the winter, once the kind of plant's finished for the year and died back, you could dig up those roots, and, you know, it'd be a challenge. You'd need to put some effort and time into digging up a hogweed root, but you can treat it like parsnip. But I would recommend that you boil it a bit more, really give it a good boil, more than you might a regular parsnip. So all year round delight with hogweed, lots to enjoy with that plant. So next, yarrow. So yarrow is really cool. So how can you find yarrow? So most people will come across yarrow like you see it on the left, especially if it's in close mown grassland. Yarrow can kind of survive the mower blades, and it can persist in the grassland and weave its way through and give you these feathery light leaves. But if you leave it, about now, you'll get that full flower head. Now, when people see it, it looks like a carrot. So lots of people think, oh, is this a member of the carrot family? But it is in fact a member of the daisy family. So, you know, while edible, it is a daisy rather than a carrot. So nice and easily recognisable. Leaves and flowers can be used in salads, but they can be a bit bitter. So I often recommend treating like salt and pepper. Use sparingly, don't use a lot. Those fresh leaves can be dried or used raw to make a tea, a wild tea. So just infuse them with some hot water. But yeah, those leaves can be used in almost any dish as a vegetable, soups, sauces, or boiled or simmered in batter. And you will find this all over Tower Hamlets. So a real kind of common plant, lots of uses. And I think there's an old story about the Greek, is it half god Achilles? Because I think his other name is Achillea, was said to use this plant to heal his wounds that he got in battle on his Achilles heel, because I think he was dipped into a magical stream or lake as a child, but his mum had to hold on to him so he didn't wash away, if I'm remembering the myth properly. And that's why he had that weak point, because that wasn't submerged. Seems odd. Why wouldn't, anyway, maybe the river was flowing very fast, I don't know. But yeah, but it is a known wild plaster. I've used it in forest school for kids. It does help stem the flow of blood. You kind of crush it up and stick it on a wound, and just helps kind of stop things and ease things. But also the act of doing something is a really nice thing to do with children. You know, they feel, you know, that kind of whole thing of a placebo is really nice. So there's yarrow. And then the white dead nettle. So here's a nettle mimic, okay? And this is a member of the mint family. And so nettles are wind pollinated, so they won't produce a flower that attracts an insect. They produce catkins. So anything that looks like a nettle that has a flower is most likely a mimic, and one of these many dead nettles that we have. So you've got white dead nettle, red dead nettle. They're all edible. So the kind of young leaves and shoots can be eaten raw. When they're a bit older, I'd probably recommend slightly cooking them. But again, you're going to just pick the tops of the plant, just those tips, those fresh tips where the best growth is. And some of you may have done as a child, best done in the morning before the insects get out, really, and take those flower heads out, and you can suck them like a straw at the base where the point it connects to the plant, and get a little hit of nectar. So, you know, some of you may have done that when you were a child. And but there's a recipe I'm put that will go in the chat of using the tips in a frittata with leftover roasties and some cheese. So lots of nice things to do with white dead nettle. I give that one a go. Again, find that in lots of places. So herb Robert, geranium. You'll find this in front gardens, in cracks in pavements, and all over the place. It has these explosive seeds and can find itself in lots of quirky places. But again, something people might bypass and not think twice of. But where does it get its name from? So it was also known as Saint Robert's herb, and it's named after a French monk who lived about 1000 AD, who was said to have cured many people of many diseases using this plant. So that's where it gets its name from. But though the fresh leaves, so again, when you're picking plants, you're going to kind of use similar tactics that you would use when picking your fruit and veg in a supermarket or store, wherever you buy your fruit and veg for. You know, does it look fresh? Does it look nibbled? Does it look old? So just kind of use those similar kind of skills you've developed when picking your fruit and veg to kind of decide which of those leaves are the freshest leaves. So you can eat them raw, or put those leaves straight in a mug and have a cup of tea. And the flowers are really good. I mean, it's tedious to pick them. They are very, very tiny. But if you put the effort in, nice thing to do with kids, got little nimble fingers, you can pick those flowers and they taste like garden peas, you know, a fresh pea. I've sprinkled them just on cream cheese. So, you know, got some cream cheese, stirred in some sorrel leaves, and then just sprinkled some flowers on. You can't really see the colours too well here, but they're kind of pink and they can be white as well, and they look really great against cream cheese. So it's just a bit of flair more than anything. So it's you know, but it's a nice fun thing to do if you're up for kind of a very delicate exercise of picking herb Robert flowers. Elder, the queen of the summer. And at this time of year, there are lots of sprays of elderflowers all over the place, lots and lots of them. You know, I don't go delving into woods for elder trees. You'll often find them at the margin. You'll find them in car parks. You know, they'll pop up in all kinds of places, but they are the queen of summer drinks. But you should only eat the flowers and the berries. The rest of the plant contains various chemicals that metabolize into cyanide when you eat them. So apart from poisoning yourself, it will induce vomiting. And that's not a nice thing to do at all in any way, shape or form. But the best time to collect elderflowers, much like I said with the white dead nettle, I would recommend getting out early on a bright, dry morning to collect your sprays of elderflowers. Lots of people have picked them in the afternoon, and then they've steeped them to make their champagnes or cordials, and their house stinks of cat pee. Not nice. And then all that effort of picking the sprays of flowers kind of goes to waste, because you kind of have to throw away all those. So get out on a bright sunny morning to collect those sprays of elderflowers, and then you'll get that distinctive flavour and taste. But you can make a nice flat lemonade with them. You can make syrups and cordials and champagnes. You can even fritter the flower heads in whatever butter you like. But again, when you're frittering them, you're just going to pick the frittered flowers off. You're not going to make the mistake I made once, which is just kind of take that lovely frittered flower head and stick the whole thing in your mouth and eat it, because we all got quite sick. And once we were sick, it was fine, but it was a bit disconcerting at the time. So yeah, do exercise caution with elder, but lots of fun things you can do with them. You can put the flowers in ice cubes with elderflower cordial that you can make yourself or buy, and you know, sprinkle it in your Pims and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, the real queen of summer drinks. Cleavers, sticky weed, sticky willow, sticky willy, all kinds of interesting names for these plants. It feels sticky, but it's not actually sticky. All over the plant are these lovely short, stiff hairs that allow it to grip and climb up through other vegetation because it's an annual. It's got to do its thing in the year it germinates, and so it feels very sticky when you hold it. But they're kind of all kind of hooky hairs like Velcro. And again, a lot of people might not even consider eating this because, you know, it's bristly and think, I don't want to eat bristly. And again, all of our salad leaves are all smooth and bald, so we're not used to texture in salad leaves that we eat. So don't be put off by salad leaves. So a lot of the time, if you're going to eat bristly things and hairy things, you can soften those hairs with the dressing. So you know, you can just make it a bit more palatable. But you can eat the fresh tips and just eat those raw. They're really good. But it is a good general salad leaf. But later on in the year, it's often good to quickly blanch it. So quickly dunk it in a rolling boil of water, and that will help soften those hairs. And you can just eat it as it is. But a nice thing that I like to do with it is to kind of make a nice cold infusion with it. So I'll kind of collect a bunch of Cleavers. You know, don't really care what it looks like. Chop it up really crudely. Stick it in the bottom of a cafetiere with maybe some cucumber and your favourite citrus, whatever that might be, orange, lemon, lime. Fill the cafetiere with your favourite water, tap or bottle, whatever, and stick that in the fridge for the night. You know, you might do that before going to bed. Then stick it in the fridge overnight and take it out, and off you go. You've got yourself a nice cold infusion. It'll have a nice green tint to it, and you know, it's a nice fun thing to do with Cleavers. But also, if you look carefully, kind of towards the middle of the picture, you might be able to see these round seed heads. And they're the things get stuck to you when you go walking in grassland. You know, you'll come out and you've got all these round seed heads stuck to your laces and your socks and the bottom of your trousers. A good way to collect mature seed heads, because it is a lot of effort to collect them by hand. But if you can be bothered, the mature seed heads can be roasted and ground and used like coffee. So no park is going to mind you taking their Cleavers and enjoying it. There is a lot of it around, and you can enjoy it for quite a considerable amount of time. Alkanet. People go, is that borage? Well, it's kind of in the same family, but it isn't borage. And again, you'll find this in front gardens. It is something that is increasing in dominance in parks and front gardens and places like that. It is very bristly, as you can tell, and it can be a bit stiff. I don't know anyone who's bothered to make the effort of eating the leaves. Most people think it's not worth it, but the flowers are worth collecting. So if you are happy to kind of plough through the bristles and you can be bothered, they are really tiny, those flowers, and be bothered to collect the flowers, they are a worthwhile thing to eat. So again, you know, can be used as decoration on cakes, or you know, on top of a cream cheese or something, you know, just or sprinkled over the top of a salad, you know. So nice thing to do if you can. You've got the nimble dexterity and the patience to collect those flowers, but it is very tedious, especially trying to, you know, the bristly hairs. Oh, it's really quite uncomfortable. So it may not be worth the effort, but a nice thing and something that lots of people will see around and wonder whether they can eat it. So you can eat the flowers. They're worth a try. Tri-cornered leek. In the top right, there's a photo of why it's called tri-cornered leek, because it looks like the tri-cornered hat that pirates wear. Okay, that's where it gets its name from. This time of year, it's not looking as fresh and as erect as that. It's kind of collapsed to the floor, but still very edible. The leaves, the flowers, the buds, the bulbs, bulbules, the whole plant's edible. You can eat it fresh. You can cook it. You can put it into pestos. You can stir fry it. You can add it to soups and salads and stews, and it's a bit like a spring onion. So there's some suggestions, but everyone's got their own flair and fun with cooking. So, you know, whatever you want a spring onion flavour with, go for this. It's lots of people think, oh, your white bluebells are looking a bit sad. It does look a bit sad this time of the year. But once it's finished flowering in the winter, there's kind of a short period where the ground's bare, where there is no more tri-cornered leek where it goes, and that tends to be kind of the kind of latter the winter period. and you can kind of ferret through the soil and you'll find all the little bulbs, and they're really nice, like a little silver skin onion or something like that. So again, something for a lot of patience. So a lot of foraging requires patience and commitment and time. So when you go out foraging, you know, give yourself a day to enjoy it. Don't go out in a rush to kind of collect something before a meal you might have with guests. Kind of enjoy the experience and spend time in your open spaces and just kind of mooch about and try things as you go once you're confident with the ID. But, yeah, try cornered leek. Lots of places you'll find that as well. Lots in the cemetery park, and we certainly aren't going to mind you having it. It's massive carpets of it. Lemon balm. So there we go. It is another member of the mint family. Quite distinctive. When you rub the leaf, it has a distinctive lemon smell. The young leaves can be used in a salad. And it's very aromatic, so you could consider using it in salsas and marinades. But it's good in fruit desserts, drinks, ice creams, custards, cakes, and it's a nice tea leaf. And again, you're just going to take those tops, those kind of fresh tops, and yeah, you'll find that in all kinds of places. It can grow in the depths of the woods, but you'll often find it in more marginal areas and in kind of dappled shade and kind of semi-shade areas. But yeah, lots of fun can be had with this plant to infuse different things, as I said, like custards and fruit desserts and things. So really worth giving lemon balm a go. And here we go, perennial wall rocket. Again, so something that we didn't have a lot of in the cemetery park, but we have a lot of, and it's appearing in lots of different places across the borough. And this is a perennial, unlike the farm version, which is an annual. And so you kind of got the plant there on the left in its entirety, and then I've kind of picked a leaf, and so you can see it, that kind of distinctive rocket shape is a mustard family. It is in many ways, it's quite a different flavour. It's more peppery, it's more spicy, and has a lot more heat to it. So if you like that if you would like a stronger rocket flavour, give this one a go. And you know, chop it into your salads, sprinkle it over your pizza. Whatever you want to do with a stronger flavour rocket, go for this one. By late summer, the leaves are probably best quickly cooked, boiled for 30 seconds. That heat can get a bit stronger and not for everybody, but if you like that, you know, go for it. But one of my most favourite things to do with it this time of year is those flowers, and they do last quite a long time. And if you pick those flowers, again, early in the morning before an insect might have visited, it is quite a spectacular taste. They're really, really sweet. So you kind of eat it and you get this kind of sudden shock of sweetness. And then as you work through eating it, you get this rocket aftertaste that kind of lingers. It's really quite strange getting that from a flower. And we always get lots of, ooh, when we kind of share the rocket flowers with people. You know, people are kind of going, oh, wow, I didn't expect that. So really, really worth looking out for rocket and giving that a go if you want to try something a bit hotter. So that is that's kind of my last slide. That is an absolute kind of whirlwind tour through things you might find commonly. I wanted to leave lots of times for questions because there are often with foraging. There is a book list as well that's going to be posted because lots of people ask me about books and what ones to start off with. But I will stop my screen share here and let people kind of ask any questions if they have any, really.
I think from the chat, Ken,
yes.
One of the questions was, it's not quite human foraging. Why does my dog eat common mallow?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. We find lots of dogs in the cemetery park, like all kinds of different plants. They tend to like to eat the goose grass, and they like this woodland grass we've got. I think it's just part of roughage. You know, dogs want to get some greens, helps with their digestion. But I've never found a solid answer for why dogs choose certain greens over others. So I'm just guessing they just want some vegetable matter. You know, they do this kind of funny cow behaviour.
Fair enough. Phil is saying you should write a book.
I should write a book. The thing I say about foraging, we are all standing on the shoulders of giants. We are learning from what others have done and before us. We bring our own kind of flair and interest of foraging to it and our own interest into cooking. So you kind of bring your own individuality in it. But I don't believe I bring anything new to foraging. I'm literally, I love plants. I like sharing plants with people, but not many people turn up for botany tours, but they turn up for a wild food tour. But, we all like enjoy eating. We all like sharing food with others. And we
You
all
could
like
become one of those giants, Ken.
yeah,
Just saying.
Maybe.
Not too
I don't
late.
know. Not too late. I am writing a book, but not about foraging.
Mm.
I'm co-authoring a book, but yeah, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I don't feel I'm doing anything to.
Do we have any volunteers here who want to help Ken write that book where you are the ghostwriter? Ken will tell you some things.
Exactly. But yeah, the main thing is enjoy plants, get out there, and bring your own flair of cooking to kind of wild food. You know when you get to know plants and you get to know their flavors, you can then think of recipes and the elements in the recipes and how you might be able to substitute a wild plant for a shop bought ingredient. You know, you might be able to swap the flavors around and go, well, I'm going to use, hogweed seeds as a cardamom substitute, or I'm going to get some wild perennial rocket instead of just using shop bought rocket. So it just gets you kind of thinking. If you enjoy those kind of thoughts and playing around with recipes, and that's a great thing about it.
Stephanie asked, are pink and white yarrow flowers the same species? I think they're all Achillea millefolium, right?
Yeah, they are. You've kind of got the garden varieties, so the things bred for the garden trade, but the true wild form has white. But even in the wild, you can get a slight pink tinge to the white flowers.
Phil asked, where have you seen a perennial wall rocket around East London? I think on Scrapyard, not Scrapyard.
In Scrapyard Meadow, so the southern side of the cemetery park between Bowcommon Lane and Nat Road along Cantrell Road, there is lots of rocket there. But you will find it at the scrubby edges of places. So walking around the borough, you can find it at the edges of kind of areas that have been developed, or edges of parkland, areas that aren't being mown. That might be a bit rough, you'll find it. But I've seen it in Mile End Park. I've seen it pop up in Victoria Park. So it is around, but we have a lot of it in the cemetery park.
I know. I spent a lot of last summer digging it up, I seem to remember.
Yeah, that's right. Just to control some of it.
Tan asks, are alkanet leaves edible despite the spikiness? And
they are edible.
Natalie says they taste a bit of cucumber. Is that right?
Yeah, they are. They are edible, but you would treat them like a potable herb. You'd cook them, but it's not something to write home about. But if other people enjoy them, go for it. I'm not. That's my personal take on it.
Fair enough. Claire said that you say mallow was for the liver. I guess that's the whole medicine thing.
It's what people used it for in the past. They believed it kind of helped with this comfort out of detoxifying, where people feel their livers and kidneys don't detoxify them and they need something to help them. People felt the same back in the past, but I haven't read any evidence to prove that it does help. So treat it as a food.
Okay.
I would say, especially to make them aloykia. It's well worth giving that a go. It's a fun thing to make, and it is really tasty.
Stephanie asks, why don't they sting when they nettle? Why don't nettles sting when they grip firmly, and why don't they sting the tongue? I think the stingy bit is made of silica, right? So glass.
Yeah, so they're very fragile. The nettles work by being brushed and caressed, so they're to prevent them from being eaten by grazing animals. So if you imagine a bunny rabbit snuffling through, or a larger herbivore kind of grazing through the undergrowth, as they kind of brush that plant, they'll kind of get stung and recoil. So they work by being brushed, but any kind of firm touching, the bruising, bashing, cooking of the plant deactivates the stinging hairs. They're not as they're strong, but they're not like a stiff cactus bristle. They can be easily overcome. And so when you're folding it to eating it raw, you're bruising and bashing those hairs, you're deactivating them. So when you stick it in your mouth, you're firstly reducing the surface area, which is a good idea, because you put a whole leaf in your mouth, it's going to sting your lips. And you've bruised and bashed the plant by folding it. So you can eat it without getting stung.
Robert asks, what is your book about, and when will it be out? Are we keeping that on the wraps for now?
Yeah, it's going to be a kind of forest school type families and connection to nature. So I'm co-authoring it with someone else.
Definitely not food. Sorry, people.
No, sorry, not food.
Let's see. Anna says she really loved it. Lucia asks, are all brassica flowers edible? Natalie says yes. Is Natalie correct?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's kind of a few families which are really good to kind of delve into. So daisies are really good to eat. The kind of brassicas that are really good things to start off with. and then you kind of build up to the carrots. Really, they're kind of the key families you'll come across in your foraging books. There are lots of daisies to eat, and there's lots of brassicas to eat, and there are lots of carrots to eat, but you need to get that confidence up because you could really hurt yourself.
Matthew asks, he's picked pineapple weed and it tastes just like pineapple.
Yeah.
That was coastal. Can you find it in woodlands?
No, you'll find it in open settings, pineapple weed. So, and in rough trodden ground. So, you know, you can find it growing out pavements and curbstone edges. And just picking, it looks like a daisy without the flower looks like a small pineapple, but kind of with the daisy, it looks like a daisy centre that's kind of pineapple shaped with no petals. And if you crush it,
we'll have to have a Google for that individually.
Yeah, Google it. It does smell like a pineapple, and it is a really good fun thing to play with. And you'll find it all over this time of year. It's in flower. It's everywhere. Where I live, it's just growing out the pavements. You
know. Catherine asks, right, in terms of where you can and can't take plants, is it more a matter of how much you take, or are there some parks it's permitted and others it's not at all? I think Hampstead Heath is not permitted at all.
Yeah.
So I think it really depends on the landowner.
It does. It depends on the landowner. So in Tower Hamlets, they have a kind of blanket prevention, but they, you know, there's this kind of unspoken rule that you ask permission or it's part of a walk. They don't really fuss too much about it, but I think it's more to protect their ornamental areas, like in Bethnal Green Gardens and parts of Victoria Park, from people kind of lifting out the expensive ornamental plants when they create those areas.
Yes, I have seen some nice artichokes growing in places which have in slightly too ornamental areas for it not to be completely obvious that I really shouldn't be picking them. Vinay asks, he might have missed it, but how do we go about getting permission to forage in the cemetery park?
You can ask any one of the three staff, myself, Susanna, or Michelle. We'll all give permission. So we need to have an idea of what you want and quantities, and then we'll kind of send you a bit of guidance. There is a little bit of information on our website.
Just email us through the website.
Just email us, or DM us through the social messaging, and we'll come back to you.
Yeah,
we've suffered a lot of problems with the lockdown, with a lot more people in the cemetery park and more people visiting parks generally, and we've had a lot of trouble with foraging in the cemetery park this year. Real bad stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting times. A few people are asking to send the presentation around. I think we can do that.
I'm happy to share it, and the notes that were being dropped into the chat, we can send that around to you as well if you want those. That's fine.
I didn't want to interrupt the questions and chats, but I've got this list of books still to share, Ken. Should I
throw it in.
Now, or will that confuse you, Susanna?
No, that's fine.
No, okay.
Right. Let's see, let me then scroll.
Anyone quickly copy and paste, it's there, but we can also add those to the notes as well.
Yes.
Let's see, where were we? Catherine asked, are there any good edible blossoms on the trees at the moment? So I think elderflower, lime.
Elderflower now, lime in a few more weeks, I would say. But a lot of the lot of trees flower quite early, so we've missed the vast majority of the trees. So kind of magnolia flowers, cherry blossom, they're all edible, but you need to kind of collect those in March. Magnolia flowers are worth eating as well, and wisteria. I discovered recently the wisteria flowers are edible, but don't eat the rest of the plant, it's poisonous, but just the flowers, they are really good. They are really
part
nice.
Of the pea family, aren't they? I think they're in the Fabaceae.
Yeah, they are. So they've got these. Yeah, I think you're right, and they taste pea-like, but they remind me of Parma Violet sweets. If you remember those little purple sweets, they got this real floral taste to them. So next year, give wisteria flowers a go. They're really, and you can pickle them, you can salt them, do all kinds of stuff with wisteria flowers.
Just admire them from a distance.
Oh, just admire them, yeah, because they are lovely.
Sally Morgan, well, I don't know if this is a question. Common marigold, question mark. So can we eat it?
You can eat marigold, marigold flowers are edible. I believe the leaves are too.
I don't find them too flavourful though.
No.
Bit of a Jerry Matthews, hawthorn, can you eat all of it?
Early leaves, certainly. So you've kind of missed the best of hawthorn leaves. So bread and butter bush, or it used to be called. So the young leaves you can pick. They're very nutty. So when they first burst out their bud, you can eat them raw as a salad leaf. Put them with some bread and butter. They're really worth it. September is the best month to enjoy the haws, which are the berries, the red berries, like little rose hips. And they've got kind of avocado texture, and they don't taste like an avocado, but they've got that kind of avocado texture. So really good to, you know, use to make jellies and preserves and things like that. And you can eat them raw, but they got a big seed in the middle. So you're kind of dealing with this big seed, so best to kind of boil and get the flavours out and strain and pass through kind of jelly bags and things to get the flavours.
Fun asked,
flowers, they're horrible.
Sorry. I just wanted to say that I think we've got our youngest Cemetery Park online viewer at this, and it's making me so happy.
There's Molly with her baby. I heard Molly had a baby. I was hoping I'd see it sometime. So hi, Molly.
Look.
Good to see you. And there they are.
Is the baby on
smiling?
This is John.
Sorry?
John Joe.
John Joe.
Oh,
excellent.
hi, John
Joe. How you doing? Molly was one of the first ever people I met in the cemetery park when I joined in 2002. So, yeah.
Might have given him a hard time. Just
yeah, they're my memories. Done with in the nicest possible way.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to mute myself again.
Thank you.
Right. Fun asks, are all bedstraw family leaves edible?
Yeah, see, I couldn't speak on all bedstraw, but I certainly know of a number of bedstraws. So you've got the kind of cleavers that's edible. You've got hedge bedstraw, which is a perennial, kind of thicker, smaller, darker green leaves. They're certainly edible, a nice salad leaf. This time of year, we've got sweetwood ruff, or Waldmeister, you know, Master of the Woods, and the sweetwood ruff is good for flavouring custards. I've dried and preserved it and stuck it in a Riesling wine, and then added a prosecco and dropped some wild strawberries in there. It's quite flash. It tastes a bit. It's got a really almondy kind of freshly mown hay type smell and flavour to it. In Germany, I think they love making jellies and drinks to celebrate the 1st of May. It's the kind of May Day drink. So we do have sweetwood ruff in the park. And then there is ladies' bedstraw, and people used to use it to get, I'm going to say it wrong, rennet, whatever you used to make cheeses or something out of it. I don't know whether you can eat it in its own right, but people used to get a crude rennet or rennet out of it for cheeses, if I'm saying the word correctly. So yeah, can't speak on all the bedstraw family. I don't have exhaustive knowledge of bedstraws, but I know of those ones.
Stacey Funny asks, is wild carrot edible? The Daucus carosa, the one with the single dark flower in the middle.
Yes, so wild carrot is edible. The leaves smell like a raw carrot, and the root in the winter can be dug up and treated like a carrot. So it's a white carrot rather than orange. I think it was a Dutch king that wanted orange carrots, but they weren't traditionally orange. I think they were kind of purple, green and white. But wild carrot roots in the winter, enjoy the leaves. The seeds are really aromatic and good in breads and kind of flavouring things. But word of warning, if you are early stages of pregnancy or plan to get pregnant, don't enjoy wild carrot seeds. They do contain something that can induce an abortion. So word of warning with wild carrots. But yeah, they're worth eating because you can eat the carrot leaves like you can eat carrot tops.
Cool. And Natalie says she's on pineapple weed infused vodka, which is quite fun. I've done gorse infused vodka before. It's great. Nice. It just smells of coconut in case of gorse and pineapple. Didn't really taste of it though.
No,
taste of vodka.
I find with gorse that the smell is much nicer than the taste with flowers.
Yeah, yes it is. Matthew, with Cleavers, are you taking the full plant or just a section? Is it just the softer, fresher leaves?
Just a general thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on leaves. Was that a general question to plants?
Yeah.
Yeah. So with all plants, you're going to take the top leaves. You've got kind of the top, because unless you're grass, all plants grow from the top down. So you may have seen these weird Instagram pictures where people go, "Oh, I lost my bike in the woods. I tied it to a tree and I came back 50 years and look how high it is in the tree." It's never going to happen. Someone tied their bike that high to a tree and then left it. So trees won't do that. They'll just engulf things. They don't move up the tree as the tree grows. So it's only grass that kind of grows from the base up. So if you tied something to a blade of grass, it would move up with the grass, but not with other plants. So yeah, always take from the top. Those top, the top of the plant is where the growth is happening and where the nicest, freshest flavours are. The old leaves are nearer the ground and less palatable and more distasteful.
Right. Next one, Carolina asks, they've seen either wild garlic or the leek triangle, what's it called?
Tri-cornered leek, yeah.
Tri-cornered, were all down to the ground as if someone has stepped on it. Does that happen naturally?
So with
combination, I think.
Yeah. So with tri-cornered leek, it does. Across the cemetery park, it looks like someone's done roly-polies all over it. It's really flat and kind of sad looking. The wild garlic is starting to look less its best. It is starting to kind of look a bit limp, but it is ripening the seed pods, which are nice capers alternatives as well as eating in their own right. So yeah, those kind of plants are all looking less than their best, but it will be there will be some trample in there as well.
Matthew asked, there's viburnum near where I am. How can you tell the difference in relation to elderflower? Is it the smell, I think?
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, I would say that's the main thing. Viburnum smells very different. And I don't believe, I mean, you probably can eat viburnum flowers, but you probably wouldn't want to.
Yeah, I think, how would you describe the smell? Sort of just nice.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, fresh.
Yes.
Floral.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway. Catherine, one more question. It says, any tips for finding pine nuts? Find a pine.
Oh yeah. That would be, I mean, we don't have any pines in the cemetery park. I don't know if they come from a particular pine. Someone might be able to say where.
I think the monkey puzzle tree that has pines cones as well. Anything with pine cones might have pine nuts, but I think you need to get in there early before the squirrels do.
Yeah, do, and the birds get in the cones and pick them out. So, you know, there are kind of Scots pines on the kind of green bridge of Mile End Park. That's a yellow bridge, you know, but they call it the green bridge. There's pines there, but yeah, you do have to fight the birds to get those pine nuts. Probably shake them out to gather them.
And I think that is the end of the questions.
Right.
Anyone else? Just a load of thank yous. Sally says thank you. Astrid says thank you. Stephanie says thank you. One more question.
Oh.
Natalie, you can probably see that one. Are all pines and spruce edible other than you?
Yeah, so you can eat pines and spruce. I like to use spruce leaves and pine leaves in to make teas. You can make a wonderful pine cordial and syrup with pine leaves. You can also use pine and spruce in kind of, you know, stuffing things, you know, because they just, you know, as well as, but if you're using them in kind of stews and casseroles, you might want to put the leaves in a spice bag, because otherwise it'll be like fishing out bones when you eat it. So just let the flavors infuse in your cooking if you're using the leaves. But yeah, well worth trying. I mean, if you do it in December time, it's like Christmas in a glass, eating kind of pine and spruce. It's really nice. I've had a really nice pine cordial, and there's loads of recipes online for it, so well worth giving that a go.
Cool. I think
and also, if anyone wants to ask any questions, like verbally, you're very if you want to wave your arms around, we're very happy to do it that way too. No way.
Love the sound of that mustardy.
There's a baby waving its arms.
There is.
Not sure that's going to happen. Cool. Well, thank you.
Yeah, Highgate one was just pointing out very importantly about the yew.
Yeah, don't eat yew.
Yeah. Don't eat the fleshy part is okay, but not the seed. But I say just stay clear.
Yeah, it's yew is deadly. There is only one part you can eat, and that's the red flesh of the berry.
It tastes
like a raspberry strawberry type thing, but don't.
And not particularly flavourful strawberries. No. So just stick with the strawberries. It's less risky.
I would. Okay. There's lots of wild strawberries in the cemetery park at the moment as well, and they're like eating candy floss.
Nice. One more question. Have Christmas trees been treated in any way you shouldn't eat them?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I'm sure they're probably sprayed with pesticides and things maybe when they're growing, so always good to give them a wash, and if in doubt, you know, quickly boil them. And if you're going to make syrups, and cordials with them, you're going to cook them anyway, so that'll deactivate a lot of things. But yeah, if in doubt, leave it out. Go back to the beginning, you know, if you're not sure. But yeah, good question. You'd have to probably talk to the Christmas tree supplier, ask if they know how the tree's cared for while they're growing it in a nursery.
I think another one, there's broom where I am. Is it edible, and what's the best way to eat it?
Broom, I think just the flowers are edible. I to be honest, it's not something I've tried. So there are, you know, in some of the links I've shared, there's some really good foragers that I like. I'm a real big fan of the Galloway forager. He does lots of amazing stuff. He may well have something on broom in there, but it's not something I've delved into. So apologies, I can't answer that question properly.
And I think that's it, really. Ken, would you like to?
Yes, yeah, no, fair point about looting and foraging. Yeah, you know, foraging I would consider a kind of sympathetic, considerate activity. You know, looting is probably a better word, you know, for when people are being irresponsible and just kind of crashing into a place, you get that green-eyed greed, or they're selling it. We do know that wild garlic will sell 40 quid a kilo. So in these strange times, people may well be digging it up and selling it to restaurants doing takeaways. Well, thank you all very much for joining this evening and supporting the Cemetery Park. I hope you learned something interesting from an absolute whirlwind tour through an introduction to wild food. But yeah, when we can all start gather together, we do regular wild food walks, both in our own right and through the Forage London banner. So you can come and make a mighty wild green smoothie with me, or try some pesto, or maybe some nettle leaf fritters, which I make in tempura batter. And they're really good because you put pesto on it and you eat your plate. Fantastic. Really nice. Did that with the Australian Women's Society once. They really enjoyed that.